Burnett is one of our featured speakers. We've had winner of Nobel Prize for carbon nanotubes to the woman that paddled across the world's oceans by herself, paddled, that is. Because No Limits is thinking way outside of what we think is possible. And what Bill?
Pat, can you back up a bit? Because the camera is right.
No,
okay. Stay where Bill is.
Okay.
But the camera is that ball's right there.
Okay.
Yeah, they're just seeing your shirt.
And so what Bill and Stanford have done is to really go beyond what most people think education would be possible. But in my opinion, it's essential for the future of the U.S. in particular, for workforce development, and igniting what I think is a natural human condition in creativity. And they've created a methodology to teach, which is extraordinary. Teaching something like that, or at least teaching to create that opportunity is extraordinary. And they've done lots of experimentation. Now, Bill is trained as an engineer, but he's been doing design for many, many years. Spent several years at Apple and the Star Wars toys, if you might remember those. We talked about that last night. I never knew. He knows all about them. But it's interesting because these things all share a common thread. And you're going to hear more about that today and how this is an important part of education. And so what we're hoping to do in Hawaii is actually build this into education from K-12 to the university level. Now, we've got some special guests I thought I'd just recognize before we get started. The First Lady, you could just stand up. And the University of Hawaii President, Dave Glasner. And we have some others, but we're going to get rolling. And to properly introduce Bill Burnett, we have a lay. I want to wish him a welcome and a warm aloha. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I don't know if I can actually follow Nobel Prize winners or people who can paddle across, the Atlantic Ocean or Pacific Ocean, but I'll do my best. And as Abby very nicely introduced, I'm the professor at Stanford, consulting assistant professor in mechanical engineering. Our design thinking program, our design program, is actually inside the engineering school. Most design schools, if you're kind of familiar with them, are in the art and architecture department somewhere in the art program. And we didn't start that way. I'll tell you more about that as we go. But we have an undergraduate program in design. You got a bachelor's of science in engineering design, and we have a master's of science in engineering design as well. So we have 2 degree programs, an undergraduate and graduate degree, and I'm the executive director of those programs. And I've done a bunch of other things. I'll talk a little bit about the Apple experience and the Kenner experience, but most of my career has been in industry. But when I finished my master's, the guy who ran our program, Bob McKim, asked if I would take over a class that David Kelly was teaching, but it was going to be on sabbatical, and I said sure. And that led to 29 years of 1-year appointments to teach a class every year. And 10 years ago, when David was starting the D.school, which is our design institute, he called me up and he said, "Hey, listen, I'm going to be busy with this. Would you think about, have you ever thought about being full-time and coming in?"
The call-in works, but I don't really know how to record a call.
Hello. Anyway, so I've been doing that role for about 10 years, and it's been just a tremendous amount of fun. I got my undergraduate degree in 1979 when dinosaurs roamed Stanford campus. My master's in '82. I did work at Kenner, which is now part of Hasbro, on the original Star Wars toys. The first movie came out in '79. I joined Kenner in '77. I joined Kenner in '79, working on the Star Wars action figures. And then we got the scripts for the next movie, Empire Strikes Back, because you have to have the scripts and all the vehicle stuff about a year before the movie comes out, right? So this is really kind of cool because I knew Darth Vader was Luke's father before you. And it was really fun to work on these things. And I was telling these guys a story. I had one of my design friends at Kenner, a guy named Mark Boudreau, and he used to, every time we came out with a new toy, a new action figure, or the Millennium Falcon, or the Snow Walkers, he would go down to the factory and get a case. And on the Kenner discount, I said, "Why are you buying all these toys? You don't even have kids." He said, "These are going to be worth so much money someday. And I said, no, they're not. It's just a movie. What's the big deal? And he's sitting on probably half the original Star Wars stuff. So I was wrong. I did go to, I did a couple of startups, and then I went to Apple, and I had the privilege and the pleasure of working on the very, very first Apple notebooks. The 100, the Model 40, the 190, and then on the 500 series. And that's really where I saw how, innovation, design, technology, and, kind of working at a global scale can really come together and make a huge difference in the kinds of products that are possible. And it was a really great time to be at Apple, and it was a really fun thing in my career to be able to build products that everybody, at some point would be. And I'm going to talk a lot about our program, but talking is not exactly what we normally do. Normally in these kinds of things, I'll run 4 or 5 different kind of workshop activities, but I think we'll keep it kind of safer than that for this hour. But I do want to emphasize that we, part of our kind of design thinking is fairly straightforward. You start with empathy in people, and you come up with lots of ideas, and then you test them. But it's actually it's a fairly deep idea about how are humans creative? What makes people creative? And what kind of intelligences do we need to educate in order to have a creative workforce? And so part of that is to recognize that the stuff we teach in school is primarily on the analytic side of people's brains and personalities, and that's an insufficient education if you want to create creative engineers, creative scientists, creative social people in the social sphere. So you have to educate both the mind and the body. We have kinesthetic intelligence, we have emotional intelligence, we have many other intelligences than just the stuff that we traditionally teach in school. And to the extent that we don't teach these other things, we send a message to our students that they're not valuable. So one of the most important things I think we do at the D.school and in our program is give equal weight to the things that we believe create a holistic education. So we're going to do one quick improv. We, by the way, about 15 years ago, in addition to the other things we met a phenomenal improv professor at Stanford. Her name's Patricia Madsen. She wrote a fantastic book if you ever want to learn everything about comedy. She wrote a book called Improv. Don't plan, just show up. Improv wisdom. Don't plan, just show up. And so I'm going to run a really simple, very, very simple improv thing. If you would stand up. And it's just in your row. Everybody face that way in your row. And get close enough so that you're like a conga line. That's great. Okay, now, if you would just do this very simply, put your hands on the shoulder and the person in front of you and give them a nice massage. Very simple. Be gentle. Do what they want you to do. Oh, you're, wait a minute, it's permitting. She already did, sorry. That's good. Everybody turn around and do that same thing. Now you're all really very, very smart professionals. You live most of your free front court department of great time. Brain to the rest of the body. What happens is your prefrontal cortex will calm down. The left and the right. It's not active. Embody your intelligence in a very different way. Okay, you can stop. or you can stop. That's the easy one. I got more. So in 2005, we started this thing called the D.school, and we want to make sure everybody understands a couple things about it. One, it's not a school. There are 7 schools at Stanford: School of Business, School of Law, School of Medicine, School of Humanities, School of Engineering, yeah, and the other 2. It's an institute, and we've actually been doing this kind of multidisciplinary education for a long, long time. David Kelly, who's the big guy in the design world, started IDEO, conceived the d.school. He had been teaching multidisciplinary classes with other tenured professors all over the campus. But at the time, it was considered maybe not central to the mission. For instance, when David would teach a class with Jerry Winograd, who's the top computer scientist in the world on interaction design, the dean would say, well, geez, why are you doing that? If you have extra time, couldn't you teach some more design classes? And David would say, well, I have tenure. So that's the end of that conversation. And it wasn't actually popular, I think, amongst a lot of the faculty, because there is an argument, and it's a reasonable argument, that says if you spend time in a multidisciplinary space, that must come at the expense of rigor in a single discipline. And so that conversation is still going on, and I think it's a reasonable conversation to have. What is the balance between rigorous education or research, in our case, in one discipline versus what can be found between the disciplines? So David had been thinking about this idea, he'd been proposing this idea around, and 3 things happened. We happened to get a dean that thought interdisciplinary teaching and research was interesting and valuable. President Hennessy, our now outgoing president, previous president, was quoted as saying, the interesting problems will lie between the silos. You have to get out of the silos because the interesting advances in the big questions will be interdisciplinary by nature. And David met a guy named Hasso Plattner, who read about something that IDEO was doing in Business Week, and called David up and said, I have this problem. Now, Hasso, by the way, is the wealthiest man in Germany. He's called the Bill Gates of Germany. He started SAP software. You know the SAP software? He's the P in SAP, Hasso Plattner. I don't know who the other 2 guys are. He had 3 founders, S, A, and P. Hasso said, I've got a problem. I'm worried about Germany. Germany is not an innovation economy. We're great at engineering, we're great at manufacturing, but we don't know how to create new value. And just look in the last 20 years, 15, 20 years, where's the big internet company from Germany? Where's the big healthcare company from Germany? Where is the new innovation in science and things from Germany? It's just not happening. So his concern was that if Germany doesn't learn innovation, and the culture has some challenges with that kind of way of thinking. But if they don't learn innovation, they're going to fall behind, and the German standard of living, which is kind of the high water mark in Europe, will not be sustainable. So I tell you the story because he had no particular interest in Stanford when he agreed to give us the founding grant for the d.school. He met David and he said, I got 2 things I want. I want to figure out how to get Germany to be more innovative. And you have a really nice golf course, and I'd like to play the golf course. Tiger Woods, by the way, went to Stanford. I don't know if you know, but he didn't graduate, though, and I think he's going to have to come back and get a degree because his golf thing isn't working for him anymore. But so we said, sure, we can help you with we'll get it started here first in California, at Stanford. And it's a really interesting combination of this multidisciplinary thinking and the design thinking methodology, and in Silicon Valley and entrepreneurship. I mean, it's a kind of an interesting location to do this sort of work. And we then, after about 2 years, a bunch of people flew over to Germany, and they created the Hasso Plattner Institute of Design at the University of Potsdam. And that is going very well, and it's actually a larger organization than the Stanford organization at this point. So it's meeting the objective of Hasso to help the German economy become more innovative. And it's interesting when you take techniques from Silicon Valley and California and you take them to Germany, they don't work at all. Germans don't like the kind of open-ended, creative. Germans don't do massage. I can't get them to do that. So I have to do different things for them because it's just not something that is comfortable in their culture. So we know from that and from the experience we've had in various schools in Asia and stuff, that when you take these methods and you try to teach them to others, you really do have to localize them. And I think there's a local version of design thinking that Robbie and Patrick's team has been working on as well. And it's also unusual that when you talk about an educational situation, it's we have an unusual embarrassment, I guess, of riches, because if you want to collaborate between schools, you need schools to collaborate with. We happen to have a great business school, and they want to collaborate with us. We happen to have a great medical school, and they want to collaborate with us. We happen to have, lots and lots of school, an education school that's doing lots of design and technology in education. And so there's lots of people to stir this pot with, and that's not always the case. But I think that's something that you guys have here is, one, the kind of stuff you've been doing in the K-12 program, and two, the stuff you've been doing, at the university level. You have that possibility of mixing interesting people together. So the D.school, has a bunch of different programs, and our notion is that we'll teach everybody design thinking. If you want to get a degree, you have to come over to my side of the program to be in a degree granting program. But the big idea of the D.school was we will teach any graduate student, and now the undergraduates as well, they're sneaking in. Any graduate student who wants to can learn design thinking methodology, and we teach it through subject matters. So if you want to work on, poverty in developing nations, you join the extreme affordability class, and you work on a project in, somewhere in Kenya to work on agriculture and improving the yields of agriculture for farmers in rural Kenya. Not because you care about farming, but because if a farmer can irrigate his field and he can do 2 crops instead of 1, he has enough money to send his kids to school. And the way you end poverty is through education. So there's these very multidimensional, very interesting, big problems that students are really excited to work on, and they work on it through the lens of design thinking. And that's how we make it interesting. At this point, we're educating 1,200, 1,500 graduate students a year in 30 or 40 or 50 classes. One of the interesting things is that our most popular class format is a format that Stanford does not allow. The registrar has no way of registering anybody for anything that isn't a quarter-long, 10-week, unit-bearing thing. We've gotten pretty far with most of the bureaucracy at Stanford because we're a little unusual and we tend to stress the system. The registrar, on the other hand, he doesn't play anything. He doesn't play nice with anybody. But our most popular classes are what we call pop-ups. They can be 2 weeks long, they can be 1 week long, they might be a weekend long, they may be only a 1-day class. You get no units, it never appears in your transcript, the university doesn't even know it happens. And they're the classes that are the hardest to get into because they're about subjects that the students are passionate about and driven to learn, and they learn because they want to. And by the way, every professor who teaches at the D.school teaches as an overload to their standard teaching load, and they volunteer. We pay them nothing. They come from there are no standing faculty at the D.school. They come from other parts of the university, and you have to have at least 2 professors for every class. So the dean is accused us of making the most expensive possible way of teaching, because you have at least 2 professors, if not 3, and then D.school fellows and teaching assistants and stuff. Because to learn this methodology is a very hands-on, very active, problem-based learning methodology. We have the K-12 program, which is very much like what you guys have been working on with the schools here. It's tons and tons of tools and resources. When we first started out, we were trying to teach kids design thinking, and then we realized you couldn't leverage that. So now we teach 600 or 700 teachers and administrators of schools who want to put design thinking into the curriculum somewhere in their K-12 programs. So in the summer, we'll have 5 or 6 boot camps and run a couple of hundred administrators and teachers through those boot camps every session. And we're trying to get this to as many schools as possible. And it's pretty good. We do a lot with executive education because the other way you can impact change is to, to get the companies thinking about this and thinking about how to be more innovative and work in a way that's more more holistic, more design-based. So, we have a bunch of boot camps for that. And then everything we do is pretty much on the open curriculum system. So you can go to the d.school website and download, a thing on brainstorming, a thing on stoking, a thing on storytelling, a thing on prototyping, a module on end-to-end. We have a 4-hour crash course, which you can do self-taught end-to-end design thinking. So the whole idea is to get this out to everywhere as fast as possible. And I think it's had, in the last 10 years, a fairly significant footprint in the world. We're also talking, or dinner last night, about there's a lot of people doing design thinking that aren't actually doing design thinking. They're just saying they are. We don't have any quality control on this process, but we're happy to work with anybody who wants to try to implement the methodology, either as an educator or an industry. So that's the stated mission of the d.school. And we give it all, and we give the curriculum away to anyone who wants it. It's open source. But it gets all the way back down to like, well, what is this thing about human creativity and where does it come from and how do you understand it and is it possible? There are some people who, when we first started this, said you can't teach creativity. Creativity is a talent. It's something you just have. You either have it or you don't. And there's no point in trying to teach it because you can't teach talent. You either have the talent to play the violin or you don't, and practice won't get you there. We completely reject that theory. We also believe there's no scientific evidence for that theory. There's no scientific evidence that talent exists. But we do have some ideas about what creativity is and why this method works so well, and why students who practice this and take a class in this describe themselves as flipped, as going from not feeling creative to feeling creative. And it's a massive transformation in their own personal idea of who they are and this notion of self-efficacy and a growth mindset. And it all starts with this one notion we have now. I'm going to talk a little bit about neuroscience, and the number one thing you have to remember is that as a trained engineer, I like models, and I know models are not true. No model is true, but some models are useful. We have a phrase in the design world or in the engineering world that all models are useful, but none of them are accurate. And we used to have a model for brains and creativity. There was the left brain, which was the analytical brain, and the right brain, which was the creative brain. And that was a useful model. It's not true, by the way. Nothing to do with what we now know of the brain. It's actually much more complicated than that. The left brain deals with high-frequency information. The right brain deals with low-frequency information. The left brain deals with detail and precision, and the right brain deals with context and structure. But it was easier to just say, well, drawing on the right side of the brain, is more creative than the left. But we do have another model because we have all this new imaging technique, and it's kind of interesting. There's also this notion that I really love that it's really all about thermodynamics. Break the whole world down, it's just about energy transfer. And that the body and everything in the body evolved to operate in the most efficient, lowest use of energy possible, because you can only eat about 2,000 calories a day, right? That's average. That's average, caloric intake. That's the fuel. If you're eating a little more than that, you probably should stop. But of that, energy has to be divided by, and all the organs in the body are competing for the resources of energy. And what's interesting is that your brain, which weighs somewhere between 2.5 and 3 pounds, is only about 2% of your body weight. But of that 2,000 calories, it takes 500 to run your brain. 20 to 25% of all the energy you consume is just consumed to run your brain. And the rest of it is to get your brain, to meetings and back and stuff, like the rest of your body. If the theory is that if the brain consumed more energy than that, it would actually not be evolutionarily advantageous because the rest of the body would be under-resourced. So if you imagine that the brain just competes with everything else and it evolved to be this, 500-calorie, hungry, neuron machine, it had to figure out somewhere or another to work at a very, minimum amount of energy, but still have these sort of evolutionarily survivable characteristics. And when you convert that into power, the brain is about a 40-watt processor. Now, my laptop, this laptop's probably 60 watts. My Macintosh is an 80-watt processor. I looked it up. The Watson supercomputer that IBM has that does won the Jeopardy challenge is 250,000 watts. It's 10 25,000 watt parallel computers. 250,000 watts. It can't write Shakespeare. It can't fall in love. It can't reliably identify a friend's face in the crowd. And yet our little 40-watt processor can do all of those things and more. So this is the most efficient Turing machine on the planet, in the universe as far as we know. But the cost you pay for that is this thing we call the box. The way your brain can do all of this simulation on hardly any energy at all, with 85 billion neurons, firing all the time, is that it has to organize information in a very specific way. And the way it organizes information in sort of schematic hierarchies means that we don't actually process the world the way we think we process it. Psychologists would say you don't actually see what you're looking at, you only see what you're looking for. And consciousness itself, the moment of consciousness, turns out to be less than a half a second long. And we know this, unfortunately, because some people who have had brain tumors or lesions have lost the connection between their short-term and long-term memory. So there are some unfortunate souls who just live in their short-term memory. They can't make long-term memories. Did anybody see the movie Memento? The guy who kept having like an 8-minute reality reboot over and over and over again. It's a horrible condition, but it's a real condition. That's happened. And so that's how we know that the short-term memory system is maybe 7 to 8 minutes long, and after that, things have to go into long-term memory if you're going to be able to construct, memories and stories. Unfortunately, there have been people who have had lesions that have broken both the connection between their short-term and their long-term memory, and they only live in the present now. And the present now turns out to be about 300 to 500 milliseconds long. So their reality is just now, 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 now. They actually function, they can walk and talk and do everything else, but they have no ability to create anything other than this instantaneous moment of consciousness. So you got 300 millisecond consciousness, you got 7 minutes of short-term memory, you got lots of long-term memory if you can make them. It's creating a video game. Your sense of reality is a video game that you're making up out of these microsecond impulses of information. You're sorting them into these stacks of schematics, and then you're predicting what's going to happen next. And that's how we believe the brain can function at such a high efficiency, at such a low power, is that it's not actually processing it's processing everything. The only thing you are aware of is the part that it predicts will happen next, which is why most eyewitness testimony is completely erroneous, because people just make up stories for whatever they saw, because the brain likes complete stories. It's why, have you ever seen the video with the gorilla, people passing basketballs and the gorilla? But if you haven't seen it, there's people passing basketballs back and forth, and you're asked, count the number of times the team with the black T-shirts passes a basketball. And you watch it very carefully, and you count, because it's kind of confusing. They're moving all over the place. And you get the right number, and it's 26. It's 26 passes the black team made. What you didn't see, because you weren't looking for it, is in the middle of that video, a man in a gorilla suit walks to the center of the frame, waves to the audience, and walks off stage. And 70% of the people, when they see this the first time and are told the experiment is count the number of basketballs that are passed, 70% of people will not see the gorilla. And when you say there was a gorilla who walked into the middle of this video and then walked out, they'll say, no, there wasn't. And when you show them the tape, they'll claim you changed the tape. Because we believe our perception of reality is in fact the real thing. but it's not. So we're in a box. We schematize information. We only see what we're looking for. And it's actually kind of tricky, right? There's one more piece of data you need to understand to understand our model of creativity. There are tests that you can give people that most psychologists think sort for a certain amount of creative potential. So we can sort the world into people, what the psychologists call high creatives and normals. Let's just assume for a moment that's true. When you put these people in scanners, brain scanners, to see what's going on in their brain, we notice 3 statistically significant differences between high creatives and normals. One, the high creatives perceive the world differently. They have more visual and more tactile responses to the world. They literally see colors more. They feel textures more. More parts of their brain are lit up when those things are occurring to them in the scan. And think about it. So high creatives, artists, higher sensitivity to color, higher sensitivity to form, maybe more tactily aware. It would make sense, right? 2, they have a high social awareness response. Now, typically, high creatives are introverts. Think of the people you know who you might label as, oh, that's a very creative person. He's an artist or a singer or a writer or something. They're kind of typically introverts. So this isn't about being social. This is about empathy. Anybody in the room an introvert? I'm an introvert. Introverts are really, really, really good at understanding the social context of the entire room. They map it intuitively because they don't want to talk to anybody. Because it's scary to talk to people. So they check out what everybody's doing. They have a high social awareness response, and they move to the part of the room where no one will talk to them. But the most interesting part, because it's the part we can actually teach, and I think it's the big finding, at least in this part of the brain research, is that high creatives have what's called a low fear response to novelty. When you show them something in a scanner which should startle them because it's novel, they simply don't react. A normal person, the amygdala would light up, the fight or flight or freeze response would turn on, adrenaline would start flowing. You would have a reaction to something you've never seen before. And even when these are mild, I mean, it's not a scary thing, it's a very mild thing. It's like I've never seen this wrench before. You will have a reaction even if you can't perceive it. You can perceive it in the scanner. And high creatives have a low fear response to novelty, which makes no sense. Evolution would select for high fear response. Walking through the jungle, something jumps out at you, you should startle and run. Otherwise you get eaten. And that's not evolutionarily valuable. And if you think about humans, humans are particularly a tribal animal. They're an animal that was most successful when it formed groups. Because we're actually pretty terrible when we're infants to about 15. We're not very survivable, so we had to form groups. And groups limit conflict by all being afraid of the same thing. We have a current candidate for president who's evoking this fear response to novelty very successfully by claiming the others are evil and we're good, right? But it's a common thing. We identify as a group because we all fear the same thing. So evolution would weed out people who don't have a high fear response to novelty. Except, when would that be the most useful? So we're a tribe, and we hunt over here in the valley, and we've always hunted in the valley, and Patrick is the shaman, and he waves his bones, and we go hunting, and we get the buffalo. It's great. Doing it for hundreds of years. He's the current shaman. We go over the valley, next year there's no buffalo. This is not good. We're all hungry. Patrick does a double rain dance, evokes the great spirits, of the mountain, and then we go and there's still no buffalo. So that's not good. So my friend Bruce, though, he's a high creative. He is my friend Bruce. He's a high creative. And while we were hunting, Bruce was picking daisies. He was the guy painting stuff on the wall of the cave. Like, why are you painting on the wall of the cave? We should be hunting. So we're starving, and it turns out Bruce, when we go hunting, he doesn't go to the valley. He goes wandering off into some other place, and he finds this thing with horns on it. He calls it an elk. Turns out you can eat elks. So we go over, we follow Bruce, because clearly Patrick's magic is no good anymore. We follow Bruce, we find some elks, we eat the elks, life is good. He's the new shaman, he gets a big 10, 4 wives. We killed Patrick. His magic has run out, right? And now we needed that creative. But just because the situation changed. So we believe from the testing that somewhere between 2 and 20%, I think it's like 4 or 5% of people have this low fear response to novelty, which causes them to, one, not listen to social rules. So when you were 4 or 5, you were highly creative. A stick could become an airplane, a rock could become, a tea kettle, whatever, it didn't matter. As you entered the educational system, you learned that those kinds of responses weren't appropriate. Then when you became a little bit older and you wanted to fit in with your friends, and you did something unusual, you got a social clue that was inappropriate. And you felt that. You became afraid to be different. So you become a normal person and you act in a normal way. And high school was horrible, of course, because everybody was trying to figure out who they were, but everybody kind of normalized and off they went. Except for that weird friend of yours, right? Who didn't get it. There's the kid, when the family got together at Thanksgiving and said, "Hey, Grandma, how'd you get so fat?" And everybody went, "Shh, don't say that." It's like, "But she's fat." Or there's the kid who, was writing music and painting on the cave walls and not picking up the clues that these were not the way we behaved in our society. So we tolerate them. We call them artists. We call them musicians. We call them shamans sometimes. But they aren't mainstream. But the good news is, another word for low fear response to novelty is just curiosity. I can turn on your curiosity. I can unteach all the rules you learned as a kid growing up and all the damage that our schooling did to you by trying to normalize you around this fear response. I can teach you to not have that fear response. Once that's gone, your natural curiosity reemerges. The work of Albert Bandura at Stanford, he was the guy who was studying phobias. He demonstrated what he called self-efficacy through a system of guided mastery. You're terrified of snakes, you can't even be in a room if there's a snake in the room. And in 6 weeks, you could have people picking up snakes and holding them in their hand through a series of desensitization steps. We used to think it was just social learning. Now we've actually put those people in scanners and we realize, no, actually, they've rewired the neurological response and they no longer are literally afraid of snakes. They've mastered that fear. So if we can teach you to not be afraid of snakes, we can teach you to not be afraid of your own curiosity and kind of rebuild the natural creativity that you had. So the good news is, two pieces of good news. One, creativity isn't something special you're born with. It's actually a defect. And two, I can teach you the defect. So you can be curious and creative. Which I think is fantastic, because it means that this whole process of design thinking, which starts with a mindset of curiosity, can be taught to almost anyone. And once it's taught, it turns out this notion of self-efficacy. Once you learn to master this domain of creativity, it turns out through the work of Bandura and Carol Dweck on the growth mindset and a bunch of other people, that this self-efficacy, if you believe you can do this, you believe you can do other things as well. Once you believe that you can be creative and solve problems and you can make a change in the world happen in this domain, you believe it in other domains in your life. And so it has this huge impact on our students, which we think is critical. In David's book, Creative Confidence, that he wrote with his brother David, with his brother Tom, is all about this. And it's an bunch of interesting case studies. And he goes into the work of Bandura and how this is, how this is working both in the fields of psychology and in the fields of design. And we think this is the absolutely critical skill in the 21st century. Roger Martin, who's the dean of the Rotman School of Business, or School of Management, I think, at the University of Toronto, has written a book called The Design of Business, How Design Thinking is the Next Competitive Advantage. Roger's the one who says, why do we call it an MBA? Masters of Business Administration. I want to hire people who administer things. What you want is people who can create things. He wants an MBC, Masters of Business Creation, because that's what strategic thinking does. It creates new opportunities. And we think it's just critical. The problems in the 21st century have gotten so complex. I joke with my students. I say, hey, I'm old and I'm going to probably retire in 10 years. But the good news is we've left you with lots of interesting problems to solve. We have a climate that will probably collapse, an ecosystem that is damaged, severely damaged. We're going to run out of fossil fuels and cheap energy in your lifetime. And we mostly have failed political states all over the world, maybe including the one you live in. So good luck. But the problems are so complex that traditional problem-solving techniques are failing. We don't think that design thinking solves everything. Engineering thinking, very powerful way of doing stuff. If you're going to design a bridge, please use engineering, not design. I want the bridge to stand up. But for engineering to work, you have to tell me how long is the bridge, what are we going to make it out of, and what are the loads. If I have those things, I can engineer a solution to solve the problem. If you say, come up with the next most delightful, consumer product in the portable, phone space or something, I was like, I don't know. I don't know how to engineer that. I'm going to need a different problem-solving technique because the problem's too open-ended. So we believe that in the 21st century, because problems have become inherently multidisciplinary and very messy, and because if you want to lead organizations, actually, President Hennessy said this a few years back, that it's not going to be enough in the 21st century to just be able to manipulate information. That's all we've educated you to do, is to take information and combine it in new ways. You're not going to be a leader. To lead in the 21st century, you're going to have to be able to create new organizations, create new systems. You'll have to learn to design. Leaders must design. And, we think the way we're doing it is we're doing it through this methodology, which we've demonstrated is easily portable outside of the realm of design itself, where where I practice, where I give degrees. But we can teach it to law students, to business students, to medical students, and they become better problem solvers in their own domain. That self-efficacy transfers to their domain of problem solving in the medical space, problem solving just in organization space, problem solving, because organizations have done it. My father, came home from the Korean War, got GI Bill, went to San Jose State, took a summer job at a little company up Page Mill Road called Hewlett and Packard. Nobody had ever heard of it before in 1951. Stayed there for 45 years and retired. That is not, that career path is no longer available to anyone I know. Your careers are going to be more complex. You're going to have at least 2 or 3 of them, I tell my students. And by the way, I tell my students, you're probably going to live to be 100, so you're going to work for 70 years. They're not excited about that. It's statistic, but it's true. And so you're going to need a highly resilient methodology for learning over and over and over again, because the world will just keep changing. Everything I learn, every tactic and strategy and tool I learned in my engineering education is no longer even available to me. We don't engineer things that way. We have 3D printers and all this other stuff. It's just a completely different world. So the ability to learn rapidly and to design future selves, future yous, is what we think makes our students incredibly valuable and incredibly resilient. Let's do one more improv. This will be fun. Okay, let's stand up again. And if this group of people could just make a little circle, and this group of people would make a little circle, and then maybe you guys in the back make a circle in the room. Just make 3 circles. It's got to be kind of a circle. Robbie, I need your help, said Dylan. All right. This is another game from Improv we're going to play called Sound Ball. It's very simple. You're going to make a ball, an imaginary ball with my hands. Now, it's easier if I keep the imaginary ball, I make it very specific so that when you catch it, you know what it is, right? So we're just going to do this. I've got a ball that's about this big. You ready to catch it? Okay. So he caught the ball I threw. Now, he gets to change the ball. Throw it back. Okay, got it. Now, that's the first part. Second part, I'm going to give the ball a sound. So when I throw the ball to Robbie with the sound, he's going to catch it with that same sound. Then he gets to change the ball, change the sound. Okay. You ready? Woo! Woo! Got it? All right. Now, when you're just playing 1-on-1, it's easy because you know where the ball's going. The thing about sound ball is you can't drop the ball. If you ever want to have a fantastic brainstorm, play this game first. If you ever want to have a really good meeting where you have to do problem solving, play this game first, because the essential part of this game is I have to make eye contact with the person I'm throwing to before I throw it. Otherwise, I just throw the ball in the air. And first of all, I can't see the damn thing because it's invisible. Second of all, you're screaming at me. Wah! I don't know what that means, right? So make sure you make eye contact and throw the ball. All right, everybody got one person to start. Here, you start. Pat, you start. You start. All right. You want to start?
Sure.
All right. Ready? Go. Okay, now twice as fast. Twice as fast. Go. Twice as fast. Go. All right.
Take it home, see what he says.
Some of the reasons we use these improv is to create the kind of team dynamics that you need in order to do this multidisciplinary learning or multidisciplinary problem solving. There's tons and tons of evidence in the business and psychological literature that if you want to have better ideas, more diverse ideas, ideas that are farther from the core, central idea, that have the opportunity of introducing really nonlinear dynamic innovations, you need people from completely different disciplines working together, and not like watering down everybody trying to pretend they're something in the middle, but everyone representing their own disciplinary depth, and then a methodology for bringing those people together called radical collaboration. And so we keep practicing with people. I like to imagine an analogy a different way. The five of you weren't just playing soundball, you were a jazz ensemble. You were amazing. You're going to make this amazing music together. You're Dizzy Gillespie, you're Miles Davis, and you're, Chick Corea. And so in order for musicians to play jazz together, they have to be completely connected, almost empathically connected. The interesting thing, if you talk to jazz players, they say it's more about listening than playing. Because in order for me to create something, for me to solo and create something I've never heard before, I have to be completely connected to what you're doing. And once you get into that mindset, group dynamics, problem solving, innovation becomes a very different thing. Stanford is doubling down on this. Stanford 3 years ago changed all undergraduate requirements. Used to be Western civilization and a bunch of other things. And after a 2 or 3 year, maybe 4 year study, they decided that if you're going to educate students for 20 years in the future, we need to do it differently. And so they came up with what they call ways of thinking, ways of doing. So every student must now pass the ways requirement. And one of the ways requirements is creative expression. You cannot graduate from Stanford until you've completed your creative expression. We didn't add more math, we didn't add more STEM, we didn't go in any of that direction, because again, we believe that in order to lead in the future, you'll have to be able to create. So we need to teach, and creative expression is as important as ethical reasoning, formal reasoning, scientific method, and these other things. It was elevated to that status. The requirement says that our ability to design, to create, and to perform each enriches our lives in substantial and meaningful ways, but in addition, will enhance traditional academic pursuits, stimulate effective problem solving, and foster originality in other areas. So it's this idea of self-efficacy in the creative space informs better science, better math, better engineering, better social science. The physicists are made better when you make them sing or dance or design. And there's a misperception of Stanford because a lot of our students are very successful entrepreneurs and they go off to start companies, and we have a big presence in the tech world. Stanford is a liberal arts university. 70% of the students are doing something that has nothing to do with engineering or science. Only 30% of the students are in the engineering world. But we've decided that everyone needs to learn design. And so we have this class that we've been teaching for years and years called ME 101 Visual Thinking. This is a required class for all mechanical engineers, for all product design engineers, for all engineers in what's called symbolic systems, which is a mixture of programming and engineering, and in a program called Science, Technology, and Society, which is kind of a hybrid program. So in order to get your degree, you must take visual thinking in those majors. But now, across the entire undergraduate population, you have to take a creative expressions class, and visual thinking, I'm proud to say, was one of the very first classes they certified as a creative expression class. Now, we've been teaching this class for 50 years. I took the class from the guy who wrote the textbook, Bob McKim. And it's a class in open-ended problem solving. And particularly since it's required of engineering students, it's a terrifying class for them. They all have heard about it, and it's somewhat exciting and somewhat terrifying, because it is the first exposure they have to an engineering class where you can't game the system. You can't look up the answer in the back of the book. You can't understand. This is a couple of examples of stuff. This is in the d.school atrium. They all had to build. In this particular case, they were building pinball machines. But the traditional project brief will be something like this, with a certain amount of foam core and cardboard, some rubber bands, old shoe, and a piece of tape, and only the energy from a falling golf ball, the golf balls, illustrate the American dream. Go. And then the students are like, wait a minute, this is a trick, right? Like, how do you do that? And we say, well, that's what you have to figure out. And so we use these open-ended problems. We put them in teams. The teams fail almost immediately because the students are, again, they're excellent at a problem set. Give me a problem set. Just give me 10 calculus problems and I'll kill it. This they don't know how to do. And so it's an amazing class. They transform through the three structured projects, all of which are very, very laddered, and they're supported all the way through many failures, to try to figure out how to solve the problem. Now, what I tell them is, the good news is there's 100 ways of solving this problem, of creating, some kind of a crazy pinball machine on a theme using only golf balls and rubber bands. The good news is hundreds of solutions. The bad news is millions of bad solutions, millions of terrible solutions that are not creative at all. So there's your challenge. Typically what happens is, we're teaching this now 3 sections a quarter every quarter, about 450 students. The Stanford undergraduate freshman class is only 1,600, so we're getting to, substantial portion. In a class of 50 students, 35 or 40 students will, at the end, come up to me or whoever's teaching the class and say, this is the best class I've ever had in my life. How do I do this forever? I go, great, it's called product design, come into my major. It's my gateway drug. And 5 of the students will go, this was completely unfair, it was arbitrary, I didn't know how it was going to get graded, I don't like my grade, I'm going to go to the provost. This class is bogus, totally bogus. And, when we calm them down and we send them on their way, because they just cannot, they're so uncomfortable, they have such a high fear response to novelty, they are so uncomfortable with being put in a situation where they're vulnerable, where really only their creativity will save them. They cannot engineer their way out of this problem. And so it's a startlingly diagnostic class for this level of leadership that we're trying to teach them. It doesn't seem to them at all that learning how to make a golf ball illustrate the American dream has anything to do with leadership. But if you watch them in teams and you watch how the teams evolve and understanding of how to solve the problem, which we say you glossed over it, you do lots of accessing your visual thinking. 60% of your brain's a visual processor, most of your ideas are represented in images, not in words. The parts of the brain that creates images doesn't talk to the part of the brain that talks. So if you don't have a method of bringing visual ideas into the world, through sketching, through drawing, through building, you don't have access to any of those solutions. So what we teach them is how to build to think. Literally, building is the thinking process that resolves these kinds of problems. And it's very powerful. It's totally predictable. It's not easy, but it's learnable. But they just have no experience with it. And they're so much more comfortable with their rational reasoning that they resort to that. And then you involve the issues of working on teams, because we think everybody's going to have this. If you're going to solve big problems, you're going to be on teams for most of your career. So that you need the teacher to do that well early. And it's all about creating what we call a culture of creativity. This idea of creative confidence, so we can reboot your confidence in your own creativity, and that will have a transferable impact on every other subject you study. It's a culture of radical collaboration. I mentioned this is Terry Winograd, the top computer scientist in the world. This is the woman, Tina Selig, who runs the entrepreneurship program in a completely different part of the university. They're all sitting together with several other lecturers. That's a teaching team at the d.school. Typically, 3 to 5 professors, and they're planning a new class. And normally, and for instance, Terry also teaches another class with a guy from the political science department, a guy named Josh Cohen. Josh started the Center for Democracy and Freedom at Stanford. He was on the Obama administration. He's a big deal in political science. Terry's a pretty hotshot computer scientist. They teach a class called Liberation Technology. Terry knows how to hack cell phones. Josh knows of corrupt governments in Africa, and they took on AIDS in Tanzania as a project. They've worked on it for 3 years and showed some significant decrease in the AIDS rate. Tanzania, evidently the government's policy is AIDS doesn't exist. It's a mythology of the Western, imperialist culture. But if it did exist, you cure it by sleeping with a virgin. So it's not going well. That policy was not going well in Tanzania. But they wouldn't allow any NGOs or other people into the country to, educate folks on what was really going on. So, but everybody in Tanzania has a cell phone, not a smartphone, but a phone that can text. And so they spent 3 years hacking through the government's telecom system and delivering an AIDS curriculum directly to cell phones, directly to citizens from Palo Alto. And over 3 years, evidently decreased the AIDS arrival rate in Tanzania by 30 or 40%. So 2 things are cool about that. One, students really want to work on a big problem, and that's an interesting big problem, and they were passionate about this. The students, they'll pull 3 all-nighters, they'll stay up all night and finish their assignments, because it's not an assignment, it's a mission. 2, it's kind of cool that you can impact a problem across the world with technology. And 3, I don't know any other place, I don't know any other university where someone from computer science and someone from political science would even have lunch together, much less concoct a class like this, right? So although I'm talking mostly about the impact we're having on students, we're having a huge impact on faculty, at least the ones who come to play. It's a culture of empathy. We don't start with the problem, we start with people. I've been a consultant for 30 years. The clients always have their own problem. They've defined it too small, or the wrong domain, or it's not really a problem, it's a solution. And we have to kind of scale back and do it a different way. We start with the people. It's a culture that values ideas. You've been around the d.school space. There's just hundreds and hundreds of boards like this full of brainstorming and things. And we really value ideas, and we value the action of prototyping, the building to think, building to inquire is the way we move forward in things. And David, our senior faculty person, is like, it's about unlocking this human potential and creative confidence in the domain of an interesting problem. So we're committed to big questions. There's an old sort of dichotomy of, are you just capturing value or just doing the same thing over and over again and getting better and better at it, or are you creating value? And we believe that you create value through creative problem solving, multidisciplinarity, entrepreneurship, and mission-driven classes. we did a project called the Stanford 2025 project where we tried to reinvent the university for 2025. And one of the big ideas that came out of that after thousands of hours of ethnography with students is that we would abolish majors. We think about it, majors are structured around schools and departments, which are structured around professors and what professors know. It's nothing to do with what students necessarily come to the university wanting to do. So we said, we'll get rid of majors and we'll just declare a mission. I'm not going to be a mechanical engineering major. My mission is to end poverty in Africa. Great, here's your curriculum. Here's what you need to do in order to be effective at doing that. Or I want to create, brilliant art for the 21st century digital native. Fantastic. That's your mission. Here's your curriculum. So we believe that mission-driven classes is our first step in this, that we have projects that students want to work on. Because when I assign you something to do, it's Bill's project. When you decide it's a mission, it's your project. And then all I have to do is stand back and give you the information that you need and surround you with an ecosystem of collaborators, and you do the rest. I never have to motivate a student in my class. I never have a student on a laptop, on a chat, on Facebook thinking about something else. I also never have a classroom that looks like this, where everyone's sitting looking at me, because that would be weird. This is not the way we do it. Are you doing things right? Are you doing the right thing? And we like to think that we're focusing, using the empathy and need-finding process and finding the true problems, not the symptomatics, but the real problems, that learning on teams, problem-based pedagogy, and a wicked problem focus assures that we're working on the right things, not just churning through doing things right. And then, we're all stuck in this managing the present versus creating the future dichotomy, because all the emergencies are over here and they draw us to this all the time. But you really want to spend, if you're particularly in higher education, you want to spend as much of your time as possible on creating futures. And that's our bias to action mindset. We have a class called Design for Impact. We have a class called Forecasting for Innovators. We have our K through 12 program, our education, executive education program. These are all about creating futures, creating future leaders, creating people who think this way. Kay was a computer scientist and a guy, an Apple fellow when I was there, said the best way to predict the future is to invent. That's what we did at Apple. That's what we're trying to do at Stanford. That's what we try to do, with these students. Our idea is to educate them for the year, 2030, 2035, 15 years after they finish their degree. They will be at the height of their creative powers, at their probably the height of their career arc, or somewhere near that. And that's when they need to be effective leaders, not the day they leave Stanford. And we know the stuff we teach them, that's tools and the processes and the programs that they've learned today, won't even exist in 15 years. So we have to train them to teach themselves, and we have to train them to rely on something that can't be, that's future-proof. And that's their intrinsic personal creativity, this massive parallel pattern matching system we have in our brain. It's really great if you train it correctly at solving problems it's never seen before. Questions? I went a little long.
No worries. Questions?
So I'll be a little bit iconoclastic because I was in a program, in the design program at Stanford with Bill back in the 80s, in the early 80s. And you did a great job presenting the stuff that Stanford done, but you ignored the most important question, and I want to hear your thoughts about that. Because you showed how Stanford does a really nice job with the low uncertainty avoidance person. That's how business school would call the resistance to what would you call it? Low resistance to
low fear of novelty.
Low fear of novelty people. And then you show that you can create effective people. You can teach people that low fear of novelty, individuals, and you have an atmosphere where they can work productively in teams at Stanford.
Right.
We don't have this way of creating design thinking organizations outside of Stanford.
Right.
That's completely absent. You kind of talked around it in several ways, and I say that because you and I have actually worked on that problem together, and tried to crack that. And sort of how do you because I got a lot of money for consulting in a healthcare company where they wanted to have creative thinking organization, and they call people in to teach it, and then they call people in to work on their problems, and they still don't get it. They don't get a culture of design thinking, and they collapse, they crash and burn. And I want you to reflect on that, because I thought people in this room might be interested in that if they're thinking about doing a design thinking culture orientation here at some point.
Yeah. Yeah, you know, the problem of changing an existing culture is really, it's a very interesting problem, right? And it is something that we spend a bunch of time on. A lot of companies, there's no one answer, but a lot of companies will come to the D.school and they want to know about what we're doing. And I'll say, great, and I'll give them a tour and we'll talk, and they'll say, what do you want to benchmark? I want to be more innovative. What do you want to benchmark yourself against? Oh, I want to benchmark yourself against Apple and Instagram and Snapchat. I said, great. What do you want to change? I go, well, we don't change anything. We just want to be innovative. Okay, all right, that's interesting. I need one more piece of information. So these 20-somethings, the millennials that you hire, how's that working for you? And they go, oh, well, they come, they work a year or two, they get frustrated and they leave. I go, well, what do you have them do? And they said, well, you can't give them anything important to do. They're only 22, 23 years old. I said, okay. So one, you don't want to change anything. Two, you want to be like companies that were started by a 22, a 23, and a 24-year-old. And three, you underemploy those same people who are going to quit, go start your competitor and put you out of business. And you're wondering why you have a problem. My sense is that organizations only change when they have to. Just like the story of the tribes and the shaman and everything. You only change when you have to, when you have an existential threat to the organization. So we had Mary Barra, the new chairman or CEO of General Motors, come and visit the D.school, and she wants to flip the entire General Motors organization to a design thinking organization. And we were talking about the challenges of that. And she said, well, look, I don't know what else it's going to take. We went out of business. We were bankrupt. I'm sitting in front of Congress trying to explain why our cars blow up. I mean, how much worse can it get, before we stop and decide we have to change our culture? But we'll see what happens, whether that's possible. We work with the AT&T team. They have a lot of people build, like skunk works or innovation centers in the valley because they know it's a good place to be. Typically, that doesn't work because what happens is the innovation center is innovative, but it can't translate information back to the main company. So the models that we know work are you have to have high-level CEO support because there's going to be lots of failure in the process of making change, and organizations, particularly middle management, doesn't like failure, so you have to remove middle management from the equation. You start small pockets of innovation that get rapid successes. Through repeated failure, they get rapid success. And then those little cancer cells start eating up the rest of the organization as long as they have some protection from the top. The one group that's doing it at scale right now is IBM. They have announced design thinking as their methodology. They're going to scale it across 147 countries, 440,000 employees. They're proud to tell me they are larger than the state of Luxembourg. That IBM is bigger than a country. But they've hired this guy, Philip. They bought a company, and the guy who out-innovated them in a particular market, they made him head of design, and he's got a design center in Austin. He says, I need one design thinker for every 1,000 IBM employees if I'm going to change this culture. So he's going to hire 4,400 designers. He's convinced he has to start with students right out of school because if they're already in the IBM culture, they won't be a change agent. He's 3 years into this process. He's hired 2,000 people and deployed them throughout the company. And all the other elements of the company are now hiring on their own because they see the value and it's not going fast enough. Can he change a 440,000 person organization? We have no evidence of that ever happening, but we have evidence in Procter & Gamble, in 3M, in a bunch of other companies where the change has been effective and powerful. But it's hard. You got organizational issues. You and I talked about semantics, culture, and social issues. It's a very, very difficult thing. Organizations, just like people, have a high fear response to novelty. They don't like change, and they will probably only change when threatened.
One more question. I know we're running late.
Yeah.
So. Yeah, Dave.
Any universities other than Stanford that are looking at this as a methodology for institutional?
Yeah, I was mentioning we put our entire graduate program on hold for a year. We're taking a gap year. I don't see why professors can't do that if students can. So we admitted no students for next year, and we're just taking a year off. And we're doing that to reinvent the program, and also we brought in some brand new fresh faculty and want them to have their DNA in the new program as well. But in order to kind of reinvent this, we just had a salon with MIT, Northwestern, Poland, UT Austin. We brought in all the people that are doing interesting programs in the country. We flew them in to Stanford for a day. And every one of those, MIT's got a whole design thinking master's major now. The Royal College of Art is doing it. Imperial College is doing it. Northwestern has a big program in it, the Siegel Design Institute. And one of our students was a professor there. And Arizona State and a number of other schools. So if you're looking for people to collaborate with or just to kind of, give you some comparable programs to look at and say, hey, they're doing it, we could do it too. We're doing it. One of the interesting things that came out of the salon is we had some proposals for what we thought might be our new master's program. And everybody from around the country said, not good enough. You got to be way farther out there. And we said, well, why? They said, because the farther out you are, then the easier it will be for our programs to say, hey, we have to change too, because look at what Stanford just did, right? So they're all looking for an excuse to innovate in their programs. They don't necessarily have, Michigan and some other schools. I mean, they're big state schools. They have a different situation, right? They've got governance and other things that they have to deal with that we don't have to deal with as a small private school. So people are really counting on us to be, setting out the next generation design 2.0. What does that mean? And what does it mean to educate these kinds of leaders, into the 21st century, into 2025 and beyond? So it's an interesting problem. But there's lots of schools we can point you to. And Berkeley just opened a big multidisciplinary institute. It's called the Lucas School or something like that. I forget what the point was, but they've got a brand new building, and they're trying to bring everybody to that space. One of the things we've discovered is once you build a building, people will come and collaborate. But it's harder when you don't have a place to collaborate in. And you guys have a new space, I've heard.
Inspired by you.
Fantastic.
And by our business.
We're happy. We're happy to help you do the things that are going to be workable for you guys.
Thank you. No limits.
Oh, it's a no limits.
Yes.
I thought this was a martini shaker. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thanks for coming. Thank you.
It's called the iLab. It's my old building that IT moved out of. It's a little building. We just created a space that looks like what it's like almost all empty. It's got some cool gadgets and things. It's not owned by any single department. It's focused on where we're doing it in that space.